told me like he done before about them other guys and about us.
Guys like us, they don't got nobody in the world gives a hoot and hell about it.
But not us, Stuart. Tell about us now. Because
I got you.
And I got you.
I spend all my time telling you things and you forget them.
I remember about the rabbits.
It's not acceptable to call me a nigger.
It's not acceptable to call me a spick.
To call me a chink.
To call me a fag.
It's not acceptable to call me a kike.
And it's not acceptable to call me a retard or call yourself or your friends retarded when they do something foolish.
The R word is the same as every minority slur. Treat it that way and don't use it.
Spread the word to end the word.
I need to make a trigger warning here. Inappropriate words are going to be used. The person will be referred to as mentally retarded, which is an outdated and stigmatized term. The author needed to use the word developmentally disabled or intellectually disabled or challenged. John Steinbeck refers to the institution in which the person, the character Lenny, was based on. He refers to the institution as an insane asylum, but that was colloquial speech at the time. I just read a story in the New York Times from The Lead, L-E-D-E, by Robert Mackey. Steinbeck family outraged that Texas judge cited of mice and men in execution ruling. Marvin Wilson, a mentally retarded man with an IQ of 61, was executed by the state of Texas on Tuesday night after the Supreme Court refused to accept the argument that the killing violated the constitutional ban on, quote, cruel and unusual punishments, end quote. As the legal analyst Andrew Cohen explains on the Atlantic's website, the execution of a 54-year-old man who, quote, could not handle money or navigate a phone book, a man who sucked his thumb and could not always tell the difference between left and right, a man who, as a child, could not match his socks, tie his shoes, or button his clothes, end quote, seemed to, quote, directly contradict the spirit, if not the letter, end quote, of a Supreme Court ruling in 2002 that appeared to ban the execution of mentally retarded inmates. Mr. Wilson's lawyers argued that the court should intervene because Texas uses criteria to determine whether someone can be fairly classified as mentally retarded that, quote, lack any scientific foundation, end quote, the Texas Tribune reported. As the Atlantic Wire notes, in a 2002 ruling that paved the way for Mr. Wilson's execution, a state court judge turned instead to literature, invoking John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men to describe the difficulties in defining, quote, that level and degree of mental retardation at which a consensus of Texas citizens would agree that a person should be exempted from the death penalty, end quote. Upholding the state's right to execute a mentally impaired man named Jose Garcia Briseno, despite the Supreme Court's prior ruling, a Texas appeals court observed in 2004, quote, most Texas citizens might agree that Steinbeck's Lenny should, by virtue of his lack of reasoning ability and adaptive skills, be exempt. But does a consensus of Texas citizens agree that all persons who might legitimately qualify for assistance under the social services definition of mental retardation be exempt from an otherwise constitutional penalty, end quote. The complete opinion was posted online by the Texas Tribune. After Thomas Steinbeck, the writer's son, read a Guardian article on how his father's novel had been used by a Texas court to argue for the execution of the mentally retarded, he joined the effort to halt the killing of Mr. Wilson. The Beaumont Enterprise reported, In a statement released on Tuesday, just before Mr. Wilson was put to death for a fatal shooting in 1992, Mr. Steinbeck wrote, quote, "On behalf of the family of John Steinbeck, I am deeply troubled by today's scheduled execution of Martin Wilson, a Texas man with an IQ of 61. Prior to reading about Mr. Wilson's case, I had no idea that the great state of Texas would use a fictional character that my father created to make a point about human loyalty and dedication, i.e., Lenny Small from Of Mice and Men, as a benchmark to identify whether defendants with intellectual disability should live or die. My father was a highly gifted writer who won the Nobel Prize for his ability to create art about the depth of human experience and condition. His work was certainly not meant to be scientific, and the character of Lenny was never intended to be used to diagnose a medical condition like intellectual disability. I find the whole premise to be insulting, outrageous, ridiculous, and profoundly tragic. I am certain that if my father, John Steinbeck, were here, he would be deeply angry and ashamed to see his work used in this way. And the last thing you ever wanted to do was to make John Steinbeck angry." In 1937, the novelist himself told the New York Times that the model for his character, a killer who did not comprehend his own actions, was shown leniency by the American legal system of the time. Quote, "Lenny was a real person," Mr. Steinbeck said. "He is in an insane asylum in California right now. I worked alongside him for many weeks. He didn't kill a girl, he killed a ranch foreman. Got sore because the boss had fired his pal and stuck a pitchfork right through his stomach. I hate to tell you how many times I saw him do it. We couldn't stop him until it was too late." End quote. I have a cousin in West Virginia. I don't know if he's alive or dead. I met him when I was 13 and he was a young adult. He wasn't even allowed to have his real name. The family called him Junior. They were building him his own cabin. They had been keeping him in the basement, but they were going to build him his own cabin up in the woods so he could have his own place to be. The family was ashamed of him. These are hill people. They're not very well educated and are very superstitious and steeped in religion. It's common there. When I went to West Virginia for the summer to meet my family, Junior and I had a lot of conversations, and I will tell you this. I don't know what Junior's challenges were. He did not have intellectual disabilities. He was not developmentally disabled. I have above average intelligence, and I was even brighter then than I am now, and Junior kept up with me just fine. When you atheists call someone retarded, you're putting a bullet in Junior's head. You're helping kill people like Jose. This is not the way skeptics and critical thinkers behave. We need to stop using stigmatizing language about people with disabilities. If you can't make your thesis and your argument against your opponent any other way than by calling your opponent names like these that stigmatize people like my cousin or people like me, then you don't have an argument and you don't get to have a voice. Because all you're doing is bullying, and you're not hurting the person that you're arguing with. You're hurting people like us. Stop it.
Lenny, I told you not to bring that pup in here.
I ain't got no pup.
They had laughter.
We gonna live off the fatted land and have rabbits.
Then you could feed him alfalfa.
You damn right.
John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, directed by Gary Sinise.